thank you for returning or visiting this week. I started this last week, and I will do a recap, a brief recap, before we kind of go into our motivation and a little bit of mindfulness meditation just to settle ourselves. And then I will talk through the second session. I've got a little presentation to go with that, like I did last week. And then we'll have discussion time and hopefully time for meditation at the end. So that's the format. So last week in Getting to Know Your Mind, I introduced the nature of the mind in kind of having its three qualities and the scope of it. So its three qualities being its clarity, its knowingness, and the defining characteristics of it, like its scope, which is that it's limitless, it's endless, it's beginningless, and it's luminous. So it's basically non-material. That's the main point. And it was very important in this introduction to eliminate the idea that it is the brain. Because in terms of Buddhist psychology, mindfulness psychology, wherever you're coming from in terms of changing our thoughts and emotions, managing our minds and transforming thoughts and emotions, we really need to get a grip on what is working on what. And in Buddhism, it is the mind that works with the brain to change it. So I'm going to go into more details of what we actually mean by that this week. And but those are the main points. We need to know what the mind is if we're going to have faith or believe that we can change it. Yeah. How are we doing that? So what is it? So that's the basic premise of the whole course, and that's what we looked into last week. And I'm just going to do the motivation and some mindfulness now, and then I'll bring up the presentation. So whoever was there last week, then you kind of know this. You might know about it already from attending Buddhist teachings or mindfulness courses. But if not, I hope that this week will, you're not really going to miss anything. You're going to get to grips with it. Okay? All right. So let's just relax ourselves, whatever space you're in. Just take a few deep breaths. Mute yourselves if you haven't. I love to see your faces. So if you can, join us. If not, I understand that you're there in spirit, even when. Okay. So a few deep breaths, and as you breathe out, you're letting go of any tensions. Lovely deep breaths. And it's always useful to check the space that we're in. Are we quiet, undisturbed, and to accept it as the best it can be to support us. Whoever's, yes, just make sure that you're muting. That's great. And then regulate your breathing. Lovely, oxygenizing, refreshing breath to the brain. Letting go, relaxing the muscles in our body and our facial muscles. Finding our stillness. We follow the breath to calm the mind, allowing the sensation of the breath to focus our attention on merely sensations. And as thoughts arise, just breathe them out, let them go. Enabling our minds to be as spacious and clear as the sky. Wide open. And in this spaciousness, we can make a motivation. This is a very common practice in Buddhism. We start by thinking, why am I doing this? And Buddhists always start with refuge. They're turning inwards. They're turning towards profound teachings. A noble support group. And making a connection with the teacher himself. This long lineage of teachers, so that we can share that wisdom, so that it might benefit us, and in so doing, undoubtedly benefit others as we become saner, calmer, more rational beings. I really feel that enthusiasm. And then end your meditation. There we are. Right, so this is the original slide we started with last week, and it was basically outlining the course over 4 weeks. And this is our second one. So as I've already said to you before, we discussed in more detail the nature of the mind, its qualities, its scope, its defining characteristics. And we started to look at its relationship with the brain, acknowledging that it wasn't the brain in terms of Buddhist understanding, and indeed in terms of many neuroscientists who are putting this under the microscope now, the mind and the brain. So there is argument. So for sure, there are what we might call scientific materialists who believe that we are just physical. Walking meat, I think, is a great phrase I've heard used, that we are just completely physical beings, and that when this body dies, everything about us dies. Now, this is actually in argument. There is argument about this with not only other neuroscientists, but certainly with people who experience meditation. So what we're going to be moving on to this week is definitely looking at the nature of the brain in us and in animals, and how we are comparing that with the mind and other labels for mind. You know, what do other people call, if they believe that there is something about us that is non-physical, what else might it be called? And in doing this, we're again clarifying, getting a really clear, defined picture of what the mind might be. Because if it's not material, it's not so easy. We can't feel it, we can't look at it, we can't smell it, we can't use our senses to experience it. All we can do is turn inwards and know it through meditation. And the more we meditate, the more we know the mind. And perhaps this is why we could say that meditators are scientists of the mind, because they investigate its nature and have arrived at its defining characteristics. And then how to know your minds, how to know our own minds. We'll start looking at the ways in which we can get a feeling for our minds, even though we might not be the greatest meditators. Okay, so let's go back to the relationship to the brain. So first of all, it's to understand that beings have brains, sentient beings have brains. Yeah. So what makes us so different from the animals? Why is it that we can manage our thoughts and emotions and change our brains, whereas animals can't? Or if they do, it's an extremely limited way. So the evolution of the human brain is described in various ways, and I know there is now some disagreement, but at one time we used to talk about the triune brain, that actually there have been 3 parts of the development of the brain, and the third part, the rational part, is what makes us human. So the evolution of the human brain is that we have this kind of prehistoric lizard brain, which means we're survivors. We want to survive. It's the survival instinct. It's the fight or flee aspect of animals and humans. And then there is another part which developed called the limbic brain, which is a kind of emotional, look after your pack, look after your tribe, look after your pups, whatever they are. It's that attitude of a kind of some kind of emotional response to those who are going to enhance your survival. So for sure we carry that. Now, what happened with humans is we developed the rational brain, much more contemporary brain. That's as far as I'm going to go with it. Some of you might know all the statistics, but that's what we called the triune brain. And it was given as an example of how we can work with the rational human brain. Now, these days, I believe that science is saying it's not as simple as that. You can't separate them out so much. But for our way of thinking, it is, of course, wherever it is, whatever we're dealing with, it's the rational part of our brain that we are training to overcome our baser instincts. So in terms of the animals, they don't have this. They don't have the rational brain. So that is why we come on to the next point, the pressure, what is known in Buddhism as the precious human rebirth or the perfect human rebirth. Precious, not just because its body, the human body, is more dexterous, if you like. It's upright, it can hold things, it can manipulate, but because of the brain, because of the rational brain. So with this brain, we can develop spiritual realizations. We can develop the brain using the mind. Because the brain is so clever in a human being, we can use the mind to change the brain and overcome any emotion, any destructive emotional impulses. So that's the preciousness of the human rebirth, which is why, you know, any part of the stages on the path to enlightenment, the Buddhist teachings on the route to enlightenment, called the Lam Rim in Tibetan, it is basically includes this as a whole topic, the precious human rebirth, because it's so rare. It's so rare. Now, it's really difficult for us sitting here in our human bodies to think, well, I'm nothing special, you know, I'm just old me. You know, I make loads of mistakes, I get sick, I'm aging, blah, 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 blah. We're missing the point. We're missing the point of how rare it is, because in Buddhism, there is an understanding that there are many realms of existence, many realms. We can be born as an animal. If we don't overcome our base instincts and we get up to all kinds of, you know, greed and desire, then it's quite likely that we're going to lose the human rebirth when we die, and the non-material aspect that goes forward will land up in at the time of conception. Then the consciousness will go there and will be animal. We might also be spirit. We might have a heavenly existence, a hellish existence. There's quite a few different places in which we can be reborn. So this requires us to recognize actually the incredible nature of consciousness or mind, you know, that, and to embrace the idea that all this kind of physical surroundings that we have, the little homes we've made, where we live on this planet, the jobs we have, they're all the minutiae of existence. And that actually existence is vast. And we know that to some extent through space travel, yeah? So we've got a glimpse of that now, certainly in our age, of what's that, what might be out there, and how time is even warped depending on where you are in the universe. So all we have to do is to kind of open our minds to that, rather than sitting here and going, don't be so daft. You know, how could we ever be anything other than a human? Yeah, not so easy. Yeah. And then if you think of the variety of human beings, then how much more unusual it is to have our senses intact enough so that we can read, we can see, we can listen, we can access, and our brains are fit enough, fit for purpose, to contemplate and think about spiritual development. How rare is that? You know, even if you're an incredibly intelligent human being, even if you're part of, I don't know, Mensa or something, you know, you're one of these, you're an incredible scientist or whatever, your mind could be closed, for instance, like scientific materialists, to the idea that there's anything about us that can change. Yeah? So the precious human rebirth is, we're human, we're dexterous, we're fit enough, we've got long enough, hopefully. That again is another thing, that we're healthy enough, yeah? And that we have the capacity for contemplating who and what we are and why, and wanting to engage with a way of learning that is going to develop our minds. So, precious human rebirth. Having access to spiritual teachings, being open to them, and being able to engage with them and make changes. Amazing, amazingly rare. I don't know if you've heard of the example given, and I think I'll get this right, but there's a story that it's as rare as a blind turtle who's been swimming under the ocean for eons, coming up for air one day. It's got big lungs, this turtle. Coming up for air and managing to put its head through a golden ring, which has been floating, the only golden ring which has been floating on its surface. So, woo. I don't know whether they say that to scare you. I always think there's an element, from in Tibetan Buddhist teachings that, you better do this or else you're going to end up as... But anyway, I've been, thinking about this for a while, teaching it for a while. And if you look around, okay, there's 7 billion human beings. How many of us are practicing what I would call the Dharma or being compassionate, How many of us are Christian and get what Christianity is, not use it against others, yeah? So there's all kinds of ways in which we can be religious, but not necessarily spiritual. That's something I stand by. You might be religious and use it. You use the teachings of some incredible compassionate person, but for your own gain. Ways of misinterpreting religion. And then, I don't know, trillions of insects and animals. And that's what we can see. That's what we know about, yeah? And then if our minds are open enough, then for sure we might consider that there are spirit beings, that there might be heavens or hells. We have to use our imagination, or maybe we have memories, or we dream, or we're kind of open to that. So, considering how many ways in which we can be reborn, I think it's not so difficult to look at what we've got now and go, wow, it's pretty amazing. And I better get on with it, basically, yeah, and create the causes for having a precious human rebirth again, which is practicing morality and having been in contact with spiritual teachings. Yeah. So, morality is at the basis of all religions, isn't it? And in Buddhism, morality is very specifically about managing our thoughts and emotions. Because when we manage our thoughts and emotions, our morals follow through. If you have a positive thought about somebody, a generous thought, you're not going to steal from them. If you really understand that by, shagging somebody else's partner, you're going to cause a big mess and a lot of suffering, then you'll think twice. So just down to the very normal things that happen day by day that we kind of get away with. I would give England as an example now and make a joke about Boris Johnson, because of course he's been partying way too much, playing, and you think, come on, Boris, you're running the country. You obviously care, but you're not getting it. You've got to have good morals. You've really got to walk the talk if you want respect. So there you go. Poor old Boris, learning the hard way. Don't we all? There you go. He's in the limelight. compassion for the man. Okay, so comparison with the animals, we're human, it's precious. And where does science and Buddhism stand on the mind's relationship to the brain? Well, I've already talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to give, I've got a nice little quotation there, actually. And it's Dr. Stuart Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose. Sir Roger Penrose is a kind of Nobel Prize winner for science. And they did this whole study of energy and where it goes to. And they actually came to the conclusion that what happens when the microtubules within us at death disperse. And they came up with this theory that they don't disappear, because we know energy can't disappear. Scientists tell us that energy does not disappear. It kind of goes back into the universe, right? They don't know where it goes, but what they did say, that in a near-death experience, they return. That returns. Now, what they call it, because it's very common, isn't it? This term is the soul. So they acknowledged that this energy, which they called the soul, does not die but returns to the universe. And in a near-death experience, they regather and come back. Fascinating. So that's one little thing you could look up. Dr. Stuart Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose's ideas on the soul and consciousness and what happens at death. Now, something else which I've got this great little book which is called The Mind and the Brain. I say it's a great little book. It's not little, and it's quite heavy. You know, you have to read, well, I do anyway. I have to read several pages twice to understand it. But it is written by Jeffrey Schwartz and Sharon Begley, who are Buddhists and research professors as well. So they're kind of well known. And if you want to really look into the relationship of the mind and the brain, they do a damn good job of it. Yeah. And this out of it, because I thought this was quite interesting. And they're talking about the fact that when you're talking about mind, you're talking about experience. I'm really bringing it down to basics here. You're talking about experience. And what neuroscientists are saying, who believe in that we're just physical, that we're just matter, is that we're kind of reduced to electromagnetic chatter of brain neurons, and there's no feeling. So, for instance, if you want to see the color red, then you can do that with just the brain. If you want to experience the color red, then mind is informing the brain, because everybody's experience will be different. So the term they use is the subjective experience of feeling, for example, red, electrochemical chatter of brain neurons is what mind is. It's a subjective experience. Okay, so it's very complicated. It's very complicated, and the only other bit that I wrote down for you was the non-physical entity we call the mind. They call the mind, has the power to change the brain. Through intense effort, we can resist our baser appetites. So it requires intense effort, but it is the mind, by focusing, we're thinking meditation here and mindfulness, and stilling the mind and getting to a point of concentration, which is what we do in meditation. In meditation, we're trying to attain that state of mind. By focusing, making that intense effort, we can resist the baser appetites. The way that we kind of justify our, what they would call baser appetites. Shagging somebody who isn't your partner and is married to somebody else. That's a baser appetite, isn't it? Yeah. And then we go, well, you know, we were destined to be. We have karma together. You can justify it any way you want. I know, I've been there. Yeah. We can justify those instincts, but actually by managing to train our minds, we can change the brain. So then it won't it won't even have those desires. It'll be morally sound, and that's where the morality comes in as well. So it's all fascinating stuff. So that's the relationship with the brain. I hope. So let's go on to this a little bit, because this is quite, I think it's quite important, because you hear a lot of flaky stuff, really. You know, you hear a lot of stuff about what people call mind, and I love the word soul. You know, who doesn't like the idea of soul music? You know, that idea that there's something about us that is soul. I wish we could nick it, but it's not in Buddhism. What can I say? And it implies something completely different, because the soul, as understood in religions, Christianity, even Hindu, and although that believes in reincarnation, there's an understanding, a belief that it's a permanent aspect of being human. It doesn't change. So, you know, dear old Ondy will be forever Ondy. She might have another label, and when she becomes one with God, maybe she'd still be Ondy. But if I'm reborn, as Hindus believe and Sikhs believe, then I might have another label, but there's still something about me that is going to be the same all the way through, and that's going to unite with God. Okay? So that is completely different in Buddhism, completely different. We are a mental continuum. We are rivers flowing into the sea. Yeah? There is nothing about us that changes the same. Hence, that one of the 3 marks of existence, as taught by the Buddha, is very firmly impermanence. That causes us a lot of problems, because our ego is substantiate itself, make itself feel like it exists. I'm here forever. You know, this is me. I'm solid. But even that, what we're touching here, even by this evening when I go to bed, the cells will have changed. So, you know, it's just a gross understanding of what me is. So, although in other religions, there is the idea of a non-physical aspect of ourselves. Sorry, I'm just distracted by a pussycat. Although there is that agreement, it's a completely different beast to the mind. The soul is completely different. So that's where we depart, where Buddhism departs. Now, the spirit I wanted to talk about as well, just briefly, because, you know, spirit, again, you get all kinds of things like, oh, I'm, you know, the spirit of my mum was there last night. The spirit, there is a Native American Indian spirit that is guiding me, and I'm not putting that down. I think that exists. I think they do exist. Buddhism would interpret that as what we call hungry ghosts. Hungry ghosts are a realm in which one can be reborn. And it may well be that there's guidance. I don't know. The usual teachings on hungry ghosts is it's not great. And the term hungry is given to them because there is a craving for existence. You know, they're hungry, but they can't eat the food or taste it, and everything turns to yuck when they try to. And in terms of experience of spirits, what I know is that there may be a brief departing of this body in spirit form before it goes on to take rebirth, what we would call a bardo being or intermediate being. And maybe that's when they communicate with others, and maybe there is something about them that wishes to oversee the family or worry, or maybe because they've been taken too soon that they get stuck. And then you've got your hungry ghosts. Yeah. But spirit may be the mind manifesting to be seen and communicated with others. But it is if it gets stuck, then it's stuck in it's kind of stuck in its old form, which it's attached to, very attached to its old form. So not great, yeah, really not a good rebirth. And the spirit, if you understand it in terms of being the bardo being, will find rebirth as an animal or as a human or as a hell or heavenly being within, well, they say 49 days. It's not always that. And how it's measured up, no idea. But that's from the teachings. But within a time slot, they will be spirit for a while. The consciousness will be hanging around, if you like, of the old body before it takes rebirth as the new. So that's a clarity of soul and spirit. And the inner self, now the inner self is, you could say, is probably the most the mind than anything else. You know, Christians talk about God within. In fact, you know, even the Gnostic teachings of Jesus were all about within, much more in tune with Buddhism, to be honest. So not God without, looking down at us and being judgmental, but God within. And, you know, this idea of the Hindus have namaste, I greet the God within you. It is our potential. It's what we would call our inner self. It's what Lama Yeshe said to me once, I trust your inner guru. What he meant was, within you, there is Buddha nature. And if you make contact with that and develop it and listen to it, then you're doing okay. So that's what we need to do. And we find that through meditation. Now I'll put the higher self in there because Jung has quite a nice description of the self one and self two, the ego and the higher self. Higher self, I think he relates to as God. And, you know, this is a very, very brief insight into it, but it's not so different from Buddhism in that we have this self, this ego self that we grasp onto. And then we have this higher self, this inner self, this Buddha nature, the inner guru. These are other labels for Buddha nature. That is our potential and that we are developing. And if that's not mind, I don't know what is. Buddha nature is our you know, our essential mind. Okay, so now we're coming on to something important because it's going to help us over the next few weeks while we learn to work with our minds and manage our thoughts and emotions and understand what supports us and what are obstacles. And that's the mental consciousness, which is an aspect of mind. And again, we don't want to confuse. Lots of little lines here. I'm going to take it slowly, okay? So this is how the mind knows objects, how we experience the world through our senses. We're sensory beings. They're neither wholesome nor unwholesome because all are perceptual. Right? So the moment, you know, we touch a glass, we've got a glass of water here, we touch a glass of water, that first kind of nanosecond is perceptual. And we do that with all our five senses. And sometimes they're inclusive, aren't they? You know, I see the glass of water, I might, can't really smell it, I'll touch it, then I'll taste it, yeah? And there'll be a perceptual experience, very, very brief. But what happens is it then goes, I hope you can see this, that's it, I need to move you around. It goes on to our sixth consciousness, which is the mental consciousness, a very important aspect of mind that we work with, really. Often when we say mind, we mean mental consciousness, but it's one aspect of it. Okay. As soon as we experience the glass of water, it either becomes wholesome or unwholesome because we're conceptualizing about it, yeah? So, you know, oh, it's a nice glass. I must get some more of those. Lovely cold water. Oh, so lucky. But maybe I'd ask for a drink. Somebody gave me water and I would be going, what the hell have they given me here? You think they'd give me a gin and tonic after all, you know. It is the evening in the UK. But no, it's water. Oh, I thought it was gin and tonic and it's water. Okay. So it becomes unwholesome. Now, it's not just, it doesn't stop there. That's the whole point. It doesn't just go into that feeling then turns into a different way of emoting about it. So either, oh, that's nice, yeah, that doesn't really go anywhere, or a bit of anger, and a bit of greed as well. And then I might go into a whole, you know, why would anybody and start thinking, oh, well, she's like this or he's like that. So then we're more like the ego gets involved in the conceptualization based on our background, you know, based on our conditioning, based on our karma, based on our tendencies, all that stuff comes to the surface and we start solidifying ourselves with all this stuff, yeah? So that's what happens. So we're okay with wholesome aspects of consciousness. Our biggest problem are the unwholesome aspects of consciousness. Because if we have tendencies for anger, and there are many different ways in which we might be angry, from simple irritation, you know, to rage. Yeah, so there's a whole spectrum. And greed is also about desire. Hatred, jealousy, well, we know about those. So that takes us down the route of having dissatisfied, disturbed, and disturbing states of mind. And that is what is stimulating our experience of mind will be what's on our mental consciousness. And then, of course, that will affect our feelings, our discrimination, our habits. It's affecting everything. So as long as we are kind of unaware of this, then we're not really managing thoughts and emotions. It's understanding that process of how the mind knows objects. At what point? So for sure, it's going to go on to the sixth mental consciousness, the sixth sense awareness, and for sure, it's going to be conceptual in an ordinary situation. What we're hoping is that at some point when we develop our meditation, we won't be conceptualizing so much. In fact, the aim of meditation is non-conceptualization, where we will unify with the objects, non-duality, and experience them purely. And then we're on a winner, because that's going to take us to the ultimate nature of reality, spiritual realizations of wisdom. So what we want to do when we're at this point, conceptualizing, most of us, is to start recognizing that's unwholesome. Or unwholesome is, could be destructive, could be negative, whatever you want to call it. Destructive. I call them wholesome, unwholesome, has a kind of feeling of health to it, because it will affect us. The unwholesome aspects of consciousness are holistic experiences in our body. So what we can do is, at this point, we can, through awareness, through practicing mindfulness, through practicing many different practices that are given us in Buddhism, psychological and meditational practices, to notice, whoa, that was anger. Or, oh, you're getting jealous there. And then transform those by replacing them or practicing the constructive antidotes. Yeah. So for jealousy, for instance, rather than kind of getting really upset about somebody because they've done something or they've got something, envy, we go, oh, I'm really glad. Yeah. My friend's just gone to Lanzarote. I'm really glad. I hope she has a wonderful time, instead of thinking, bloody hell, yeah, and going down that route. So that's what we do. And it has to be practiced, because when we start, it's through gritted teeth. It's not genuine, it's fake. Rejoicing will be fake. I'm really glad she's having a great holiday, And inside, but then after a while, all you're doing is changing habits. It's that simple, really. It's really interesting, because we think that we are our thoughts and emotions. And when we recognize that thoughts and emotions are visitors, they're not us, then it's so liberating. So liberating. Because then we can change everything about ourselves. And woo, it's 10 to 6. That's probably a good place to stop. Did I go any further? Oh, yeah, I did. I'm just going to. Because we're going to do a whole load on that. That's really what we're going to do over the next 2 weeks. It is on how to understand and manage thoughts and emotions. So what we've done, what I hope we've done in this session, is clarify, because there's a difference between mind and brain, that we have this, and because we understand ourselves to have precious human lives, that we have the potential. There is absolutely nothing stopping us from knowing our minds to enlightenment. Yeah, but certainly to be able to transform emotions and to remove the obstacles, the inner obstacles that we have. So that's what we're going to. Next week it will be specifically transforming destructive into constructive, and then the last week in removing other obstacles to enlightenment and methods. Okay, so now what do? I stop sharing.
Are we going to go into breakout rooms now?
We are, but I'm going to tell everybody. Oh, there's a lot of people now. Okay, I can only see 3 or 4. It's probably just as well. What I want you to do in your discussion groups, of course, if anything arises or you've made any queries or that, then discuss those. But which activities, including meditation, have helped you most to manage thoughts and emotions? That's for those people who have embarked on this, yeah? What do you do that helps you manage thoughts and emotions? And then the other aspect, which you'll all be able to be involved in, you might need to take notes on these because it's not written down anywhere, is can you identify a process you go through from the moment of, for instance, a criticism to managing your emotions? So I'll give you an example. If somebody says you're a lousy teacher, then what's the process that I go through? There'd be a bit of shock. Oh, me, a lousy teacher. There'd be a bit of pride, So you start to notice those things, and then there would be maybe feeling of heat and embarrassment of, oh my God, am I really? I wonder why they said that. And then perhaps low self-esteem comes in, or questioning. So all those processes, try and see all the different things that come in, maybe from your own life. It could be, because the point I'm making here is it's not like we've got an axe murderer living with us. Well, I hope not anyway. I haven't got anybody living with me, so I can say that sincerely. But it's more likely to be a simple thing. Why are you always like this? Or, oh, you did that again. And it gets to us. And that's really where we want to start. What we want to work with is those little niggles, because they'll be the ongoing things in our lives. Okay, so does that make sense? Does anybody not understand? Put your hand up, you're all right with it. Okay, so breakout rooms for 15 minutes till 6:10. Okay.
Okay, I'll put everybody in breakout rooms. I think I'm going to actually join a breakout room this time.
Great.
So Ondy
Okay.
will have a quiet moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's bear in mind that we haven't got a lot of time. I would like to hear from each group, but maybe if we just get, nobody might want to comment, but 2 points of view from one group and 2 points of view from the other, then that will be fair. So let's start with the first part of the discussion, which was any particular tricks that you have up your sleeve, what activities or what help you most to manage your thoughts and emotions. So let's take that from group 1. Did you come up with anything? Anybody? You need to unmute yourself or raise your hand first and then. There you go, Bobby.
I don't remember what group I was in.
Okay, so briefly, learning that there are 2 things that can happen when someone says something to you. You can react or you respond. And reaction is pretty knee-jerk, it's pretty brutal often, and it doesn't involve any thinking. Responding involves taking a breath, taking a pause, thinking about what's been said, how you would like to respond, and choosing to respond at that time, or saying, I need to talk about this after I've had more time to think about it. That was my input there.
Well, that's perfect. That's perfect. And I think if you want to bring that down to its essence, it's spaciousness. It's allowing that little bit of space before diving in, because our ego is so jumpy and wishes to, defend itself immediately. Yeah. So that space, and you make it sound very straightforward, and we all know how difficult that is. Yeah. And the other aspect about that is to be kind to ourselves. We ain't going to achieve this instantly. We'll spend the rest of our lives practicing it. And sometimes we will be winners and sometimes we will be losers. But afterwards, because we are aware, we will know. We will be able to reflect on it, and that's really important. So we have to be very kind to ourselves in this practice. Yeah, great. Thank you, Bobby, very much. Is there anybody else from that group who has another trick up their sleeve.
Ondy, I was in that group as well. And there were many things that came out of it. I love the discussion group, by the way. But
Great.
one of them was, is this is all what practice is, and it's always an opportunity to practice.
Yes.
And practice again, and another opportunity, and another opportunity.
Sure, yeah. And that's brought up an important point, Barbara, because it's to take that opportunity to be grateful to the person who's giving us a hard time for giving us that opportunity, because without these people in our lives, we wouldn't learn. It's great having friends who agree with everything we say, but we ain't learning from that. Yeah, we're learning from the difficulties. Yeah. So, and I think that that's important, because that increases our compassion at the same time, because we know that they're coming from a defensive, destructive, or whatever deluded place, and you know that they're human beings like us. So again, either at the time or later, ensure that we go, oh, recognition without them. Yeah. Thank you. That's great. Okay, let's go to the second group and see if we have anything further from that group to add. Anyone?
I don't remember what group I was.
Well, go ahead, Danny, anyway. Is it Danny?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Danny.
I started doing Qigong, and that physical process of finding the center at the time. First of all, lots of meditation came before any of this. It's been decades. And finally, I started with the Qigong, and my meditation and my awareness and my reactivity has just got is so much better. I stop, I find the center, and in that pause, then everything else flows. It comes. And I've been dealing with situations much more skillfully. It's been amazing me. And it's not constant, but it's better. And that's given me courage to keep going at this and have the compassion, the bodhicitta is more. I used to be very uncompassionate. And all of this is just, it's spiraling on itself. And the good are more than the bad lately.
Well, that's brilliant. That's success. Yeah, that's success. And I think you've hit on something there. It's, I mean, I don't personally do Qigong, but I think all these practices are supportive, because there's a sort of sense of control and slow and attention that is taking place. So anything that we do that supports actual meditation, and some people find meditation itself very hard, you know, to just sit still. So sometimes to do something like Tai Chi or Qigong or whatever these other practices are, works in the same way. But it's a kind of having a whole toolkit, isn't it? You know, it's a cliched way of talking about it, but that's what we get. We get the psychological methods, there's the physical methods, there's the meditation, and then there's, as you say, years of practice. And it's a bit like, you know, if only we could go back and remind ourselves what we were like before we started practicing. You know, you'd go, whoa, out of control. Who was that person? And kind of that wish that whatever future rebirth we have as a human, may I not forget, because how wonderful it would be to come in and quickly meet the Dharma and carry on. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else from that group? Oh, Zazen, that would be, is that Zazen? Yeah.
I was studying to be a Zen priest, San Francisco Zen Center. I was lay ordained, and I was on my way to becoming a priest. and I was in the library. Instead of going to Zazen, I would be in their library reading the Trungpa books, who was a good friend of Suzuki Roshi. And I discovered that I like this, but I knew I had to go through that for years. I had to go through that in order to get to this, because I wasn't ready for the Vajrayana.
Yeah.
And I'm
Okay,
glad.
well, thank you. That's really interesting. And I think, we find our traditions, but, Zazen is incredibly disciplined. You learn a hell of a lot from Zazen. So it depends. I think you kind of meet what you need to meet or what your karma is to meet. So fantastic. A broad knowledge and experience. Okay, is there anybody else? Because otherwise we're going to finish with a short meditation. But if anybody's burning to say anything. Well, I hope you found that useful, the discussion group. I was talking to Alex about this, and Alexis, I beg your pardon, and I do find it always useful when I teach for people to just kind of chew over what they've heard and get some ideas from other people and be able to process it, because it gives you that opportunity for questions. So if there are any outstanding questions, now is your chance as well. Got some chat coming in here. So, or was that? Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, well, let's finish off just with 5 minutes of meditation and absorbing the evening, or for you, morning or afternoon teachings. So those lovely deep breaths, letting go, relaxing, and encouraging, rejoicing, a feeling of such joy. Incredible it is to have this opportunity with like-minded people. What amazing things must I have done to be here now with you? That's what you're thinking, as well as me. Really, really rare, really special. And that in some way, your mind has moved So let's just draw the focus to our hearts, heart chakra, center of our chest, level with our breasts. And experience the nature of your mind, luminous, clear, knowing, beginningless, endless, indestructible, immaterial, light, a source of light within you. Continuum of light. Send it all around your body. Now you've created this nourishment of your light, attending these teachings and how you can send that light to others and benefit them. Just coming into contact with you. And you coming into contact with them, this incredible interdependence we have, benefiting each other in these invisible ways. opportunities to grow. So connect with each other and send it wherever you wish. Around this poor old world, struggling with so many different factors. Draw the light back in and feel it, the size of a pea, intense, burning with luminosity, not with heat. Your source of light in this world. Dissolve it. And just generate a feeling of peace and joy. And end your meditation. Thank you so much. Lovely getting to know you all. Have a lovely day, or what's left of it, and I hope to see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Ondy.
Okay.